A question for each of you. What are your views on the mega loads going through Moscow?
Okay, thank you. Thank you. Very, very important question, I think. I was wondering if someone would answer it or would ask it. And of course, you get the opportunity to ask it. We will ask you, what are your opinions on the mega loads passing through our city? Who wants to start with that? Aaron?
I'll start with that. Three things. Number one, I don't think any mega loads, no matter what they're carrying, belong on Highway 12. I believe that area is too important as the economic engine for the Clearwater Valley. I know that they've brought their economy back over the past decade, and I would hate to see anything that would happen to them down there and to that beautiful area. I went up that road probably the first time well over 50 years ago with my granddad for Sunday's fishing. I just think that area is valuable. Number two, I don't like to see anything going anywhere to the tar sands in Alberta. I believe that project is detrimental. I don't think that it fits with the city's views on sustainability. And I think that we just need to find a different way. One of our chief scientists from NASA said that project is the tipping point. That if that project goes through as it is planned, that we might as well just forget everything that we're going to do about trying to moderate global warming, that it will all be over. Number three, I don't like seeing big loads come through Moscow, but that decision was made years ago when they decided to keep the highway running through the center of town. Unfortunately, we will have to have those loads, and they probably will be going through for the foreseeable future. It's too bad. I think what I dislike about it the most is that somehow it pits our citizens against our police force. Both sides in that have been, I think, behaving in an exemplary fashion. There have, I especially have complimented to our police force, who I think have been doing a great job in the face of what's happening here. So I hope that I've been clear with my answer to you.
Thank you. Yes, yes.
Well, for the first time last night, I had the experience of following a mega load up the grade from Lewiston into Moscow, and it seemed like the load itself actually worked okay on a 4-lane highway where vehicles could actually, the vehicles actually seemed to work okay on the roadbed. I have more significant, and actually traffic was able to pass in certain spots. I have more significant concerns with the impact of the weight of the loads on some of the older portions of Highway 95. We have asked some questions of ITD. I await those answers to find out, about how they're basing their decisions. I also have concerns about the permitting fee process within the state. I feel like I'm concerned from some statements that the Transportation Department folks have made that they're not actually paying their way from a permit perspective, and I feel like Idaho state taxpayers are covering the cost of some of that, and I'm hoping that that's not the case, but I'm concerned that it is, and would like to see that addressed by the state. I share similar concerns about the tar sands in general. I don't think that project is a good idea from environmental purposes, and that's not one that the city of Moscow government has any real say over at this point. I also believe that Highway 95 is probably better than Highway 12 for a place for the loads to go. But I also believe that Highway 395 in Washington State would probably be better still. I'm not part of the decision-making process of either ExxonMobil or the trucking company or the folks that built the loads in Korea. I guess I think I would have liked to have seen them do things differently and perhaps build them in the United States or in Canada in smaller portions and ship them to the location differently if it is a good idea to do that acrylic oil sand. So I guess I have a variety of concerns like that. And then finally, I certainly feel like the Moscow Police Department's been put in a very difficult situation. And that it pains me to see anybody being mad at the police, because I feel like they've been doing a great job. I have lots of friends on the force, and I also have friends that are protesters, and I can very much see where all the different people are coming from. Thank you.
Thank you. Dan?
Yeah, as far as the loads themselves, they gather direct permits from ITD. Are they charged enough? I mean, we've asked that question of the state in, I think, several communications with them. Maybe not, but again, that's a state legislative issue. I think somebody worked out the actual dollars that they would get from it. It is a significant amount when you take it in total, but per load, it doesn't seem like a lot. I do appreciate now the honesty of the protesters as far as what they're actually protesting. You know, initially they were talking about how it was the size of the loads on the road itself, but I think if you go out there, and I've been on a few nights in another capacity with the fire department, you know, standing by and watch these loads go by, you know, also out of just curiosity's sake. If you're standing there watching these loads go by compared to an empty chip truck, you feel that empty chip truck a lot more than you feel these loads going by it. I've also heard that there is less ground pressure on these loads on the highway than a loaded chip truck per axle. So, you know, a couple of interesting things that you hear, but you'd like to have actual information towards that. But I do appreciate that the protesters are honest. That the fact is that they're protesting the tar sand issue, not the actual weight of the loads themselves as their main protest. The police have been exemplary. I've been working with them in my capacity with the fire department, you know, as far as having people stand by should there be a medical emergency and we need to get an ambulance out there for some reason. The protesters are polite for the most part. There have been a few cases of what does bother me, and that's that the protesters are targeting the truck drivers themselves. Those guys are just out there earning a paycheck. They're not evil. They're just a guy driving a truck. I mean, that's all they're doing. You know, if you really want to go after who you think might be the main problem with this, you need to go talk to ExxonMobil, not the trucking company. They're just out there doing their jobs. But like I say, the police have done a great job. The protesters are polite for the most part. We're going to live with this, and I would imagine we'll see more of this in the future.
Well, I think just about everything has been touched upon.
I'll let you go first on the next question.
Washington and Jackson, which is Highway 95, it's a federal highway, it's a state highway that's built with federal and state funds for the purpose of transportation of interstate commerce, persons, and goods. Not a thing the city of Moscow can do about that. We had a lot of different discussion with city staff, with the street department, with the fire department, with the hospital. I think Kelly was part of that discussion, and Public Works. We had a technical meeting, and the discussion centered around the fact that we could find no discernible reason why it would be a negative impact upon the city of Moscow. That's why when the city council made their comment, they said we can't find any reason to not allow them to come through. That wasn't a welcoming comment. That was simply a denying statement that we see no reason to say no. Personally, I think they're a pain in the butt. And I think all big loads are. And if I had my brothers, I'd like to see a north-south bypass so we can get all trucks out of Moscow. But we can't. We can't stop them. I would like to see them get done and get it over with. It does put a lot of strain upon our services. And we have billed Mammoth for police services so that we can recover our costs of overtime and administrative fees on that. I think that was the right thing to do. That does not set a precedent. This is a case-by-case issue. Aaron commented that it pits the citizens against the police department. Well, I don't believe it does. Citizens have the First Amendment right to demonstrate. They need to demonstrate within the confines of the law. And then if they don't, then they have to face the consequences. So they don't have to put themselves against law enforcement. And our police department is doing a tremendous job. And it's straining our resources. It's also straining the resources of the Idaho State Police. Lieutenant Alan Oswald of the state police told me last night that 70% of his time is now spent dealing with the megaload issue. Well, I said it before that other things can come to light that can change our decisions. We still can't stop them, but I would certainly like to not see them coming through Moscow anymore. I'd like to see it done. Now, I've seen a lot of them come through. I've been downtown when it's happened, and I think it's very underwhelming. They go by, they're not very loud. They go by at about 10 miles an hour, and they're gone. I'm down last night. And it's funny, they bring them in 3 at a time. I don't know how many of you have seen them, how many of you stayed up past your bedtime to see them. They come in small, medium, and large, you know. And it was funny because we were watching it last night. Who was I standing with? Well, it doesn't matter. He hadn't seen them before, and he was doing some office work when I was visiting with him. Oh, Tim Gressback, that's right. And so I got Tim to stand out there watching them, and when it was all done, it was like, well, that's it, huh? So, anyway, that's where we're at with it, and I hope that if we don't come into a super mega load transportation corridor, that at this point in time, there's not a thing we can do other than, we brought up, fee structures that the state of Idaho needs to do to make certain that they are paying their fair share if they are going to use the highways. And apparently they're going to. Yeah, I'd like to see them get off of Pasco and hit up 395. Maybe the rest of them will. Thank you.
Thank you. Another good question. Well, I thought, okay, back here.
I'd be interested to know how, as a city council, you would establish the rate of that a business would reimburse the city for regarding the traffic study, for any changes that might need to be made in terms of lights and signal lights, anything like that. And what company or companies do you use in order to do a traffic study to then determine the rate of cost that any additional traffic signals and that kind of thing would require?
Okay, thank you.
Okay.
Yeah, I'll take that. You know, that's really not going to come into play unless you have a really large establishment come in, which would fall under, I think, the conditions of the large retail establishment. The city's got a design manual that's about this thick that applies to anything that's actually over about 45,000 square feet and goes up. Part of that is a traffic mitigation study that would cover that at their expense, that they have to cover how would they affect traffic signals, and the like. And one of the things that cities characteristically will do in the process was, before they can get their permit to build, is they're going to be required to put half the cost or whatever the proportional cost may be, depending upon the increase of traffic that might be shown, on traffic lights, infrastructure, rebuild or replacement, that type of thing. So it is through studies that they have to pay for during the process before they get their building permit or occupancy permit. Does that answer your question?
And what companies do you look to perform the traffic study?
I can't answer that question.
I think that's more of an administrative deal with the city. You know, that the community development department probably would have a list of whoever would have to do that. And ITD, along with the MUTC, that's the Manual on Uniform Traffic Control Devices, they set the standards on what are the tipping points to where we decide, okay, we're gonna put a traffic signal in here, or four-way stops, you know. But as we know, there are other reasons we put in four-way stops, and things like that, but, those are the things that we need to look at before we decide what's gonna happen as far as when something does come.
I guess I heard the question a little bit differently. The city of Moscow has currently hired a team of contractors to do a traffic study on Moscow right now. It's a multimodal traffic study that will be completed in the next 2 years. It'll be, the traffic study that we've engaged will be completed in the next 2 years. I was actually on the selection committee for the team that got hired, and I can't tell you right now what the name of that company was, I just can't remember. But we hired one team, and then they've got a couple of subcontractors that are looking at specific components. But it's looking at all the features of transportation within the city of Moscow, primarily looking at east-west movement of traffic for all modes of transportation. And that will give us some information that will help us make more specific decisions on different components of transportation in Moscow. The staff person that's overseeing that project is Kevin Lilly, who is the city engineer, and he's working most specifically with the lead company. And I can look that up and let you know later, but I just don't know the name of it right now.
Okay.
And just briefly, I guess I heard the same way Tom did, but I think, touch on what Wayne said, the reason that we would have a traffic study with new development would be to determine before we approved if there needed to be stoplights, as you mentioned, if the road needed to be widened, so that these costs could be covered by the developer rather than left to the city to cover at some later date. So just have an idea of what it's going to do to our traffic and what's necessary so that they can be accommodated and the rest of the city not be adversely affected.
Bravo.
Do you think that there will be a traffic light placed at the intersection of Highway 8 and Mountain View Road?
Things like that.
In mind?
In mind.
Actually, well, no, I'll put it in mind then. In fact, I'd like to have it next week.
I would as well.
Yeah. Yeah, please.
That would be one of the places that, as a property that's across from the cemetery, which is owned by the Thompson family, which has been its own motor business. I would say that if the day ever comes that becomes developed as a retail business, that time you're going to see a large participation from that developer to installing a traffic light at Mountain View and Highway 8. Sue, until such time as that happens, I would guess no.
Okay.
But that here again, it's a state highway.
Yeah, I know.
One of the other things that I wanted to comment pertaining to your question, and I can give you, I think, a prime example of one thing that we've already looked at, because it doesn't necessarily be a retail developer, it can be a residential developer also. And I think everybody knows where Baker Street is. Okay, where Baker is, if you go over here where Logos School is where Baker is, if you follow Baker at the intersection of A and Baker, and then continue north on Baker at dead ends, there's a bowl area out in there, and the council's already looked at the Peterson addition that has mixed residential development that eventually looks like it's probably going to go in there. Well, there's going to be a pretty good increase in the intersection at A and Baker in traffic, and there's got to be some mitigation go on there, and so the thing that the city will look at then is how much additional traffic would that subdivision generate, and then that proportionate would be the cost to the developer to redesign whether it had to be a traffic light, or if they could put in a roundabout, or whatever it might be, but they would have to help mitigate their percentage of the increase of the traffic, so I hope that helps.
Okay, thank you. And Aaron, I didn't mean to cut you off. I think I did. I'm sorry. You're okay? Okay. One more question.
The current council, from my perspective, seems to be working very well together. I guess I'm directing this at Aaron. How do you see yourself fitting in and working with the council that's there now?
I can work with anyone. Sit down at the table and discuss the issues that need to be talked about. I believe that when we were having problems with the ball fields over on the Blue River Drive, I sat down at one meeting and offered the compromise that was accepted by everybody on that committee, except for one, that turned those ball fields away from being a controversy and turned it into a plan for ball fields. I have no problem working with anyone that's willing to sit down at the table with me and discuss issues and try to resolve those issues. As I remember, I don't think that I ever told anybody to shut up at a city council meeting.